Hi folks, DJ Tina, host of HMTV Canada E-Zine here with special guest Richard Chycki. Hi Richard, how are things?
I'm doing just great, Tina. How about yourself?
Wonderful. What motivated you to become an engineer, mixer, and music producer?
Well, it was actually a process of almost natural selection. You know, I was playing guitar. I started playing guitar as a teenager, and when I wanted to record a band, at that time, engineers and studios and all that stuff, that was a rare commodity for a beginning band, so I basically learned how to do it myself. And as I would send material out to different record companies, you know, to show them some demos of my work and stuff, they'd end up calling and they'd say, hey, listen, who recorded this? And I would tell them I did it, and then they would start to throw bands my way, and the bands, of course, they started really small, but then they just started getting bigger and bigger. And I found that after a while, when by the time I was in my late 20s, I was engineering full time. So I just stayed there.
What are some of the musical projects you've completed?
Most recently, I just finished mixing I've been doing a lot of stuff for Rush, and I did the double live Snakes and Arrows CD that's out right now. I recorded and mixed the Snakes and Arrows CD, the studio album. Currently, I'm working on some mixes actually for video games that some of your listeners might know about. That'd be Guitar Hero and Rock Band. I'm doing a bunch of mixes for them, and I've done work with Aerosmith, with Simple Plan, Mick Jagger, Pink. There's just such a long list. A lot of different bands.
Has any of your musical projects ever made platinum or gold?
Best one I have so far, best couple I've had are, I did a track on Pink's Misunderstood record, and that's 5 million copies in America, last time I checked. And I did a song for the Charlie's Angels soundtrack with Aerosmith, a song called Angel's Eye, and that one's gone triple platinum, so it's 3 million copies in America. And I'm not sure what it's done in Canada or the rest of the world.
Have you done any other music compilation projects for the movie industry?
Coincidentally, I actually just finished doing one for a movie that's currently in production with DreamWorks. It's a movie called I Love You Man, and the band Rush makes a cameo appearance in the movie, and I just finished doing a track for them for the movie.
Do you have any musical influences?
You know what? I like all the music that I enjoy listening to. I love music that moves me, that gives me an emotion, hopefully a positive emotion. But I like music that I don't like cookie cutter music. I like music where I can feel what the band is trying to communicate. And when it comes to, say, influences, a lot of my influences are, I work in a pretty wide genre of music. A lot of it's heavy, so if I'm working with a fairly heavy band, I'll listen to a lot of heavy music just so I can stay in that sort of mind space. But if I'm working with something like Seal or something, something that's a little more adult, a little more urban, I'll concentrate on doing music like that. I would love to tell you I have a specific artist or genre that I enjoy, but it's such a wide variety of things that end up crossing paths with that it changes all the time. So it actually turns out to be a really interesting musical cross-section.
That brings me to my next question. Because music styles change constantly, how do you stay current in the competitive industry?
The great thing is that as far as it being competitive goes, what I end up doing, about 90% of my work right now is mixing records. And a lot of artists, and these are both signed artists and independent artists, a lot of them record their records in their own environment, either on their own or with an engineer, but they usually do it in their own environment. And then when it's completed, they'll send it to me to basically put the polish on it and make it a professional, releasable product. And so what I'm finding inside from what I'm doing, it's actually not that competitive because it's a very sort of exclusive thing that I'm doing. I use a computer. I've sort of tossed the whole old school approach of using a huge SSL console. And, I've sort of tossed all that stuff, and it's all modern computers. It's proven. It's sold millions of records, and record companies know it. Bands are getting more intelligent about their choices from a business point of view, and as are record companies. So it hasn't really worked to be competitive in a bad way. It's worked out actually fantastic for me. I've been having the best 5, 6, 7 years of just been ramping up exponentially.
Do you think of music as an evolving process when it comes to mixing and recording?
It completely is an evolving process, and that actually is that's very similar to what I was just discussing, that in the old school of mixing on a console and doing stuff in a very inefficient, costly way, that sort of thing is if you can't adapt to the changes, especially, and the internet has brought sweeping changes to the way people consume music. If you can't adapt to that, then you're going to have I think you're going to have a hard time flourishing in the industry.
What's your criteria for a well-mixed or a recorded song?
A well-recorded song is, and I'll give you a good example. I did a halftime feature for the Super Bowl I think it was in 2001, and Aerosmith was in it, and I had some of the original masters from Walk This Way, and I turned up the faders. I just put the faders up, and it sounded exactly like the record. You know, there wasn't any trickery on my part. I just basically turned it up and got balances, and it sounded just like the record. And in my opinion, that is a really well-recorded record. As far as a mix goes, mix is by modern standards something that's going to be again, it moves you emotionally. You can hear absolutely everything, right? So see, the drummer can hear what he's playing. Guitar player, he hears everything he's doing. Nothing is buried. Everything is audible. Everything sounds good. And it doesn't sound good, then it doesn't sound good deliberately. Part of, say, you make a drum set sound all sort of small and weird or whatever because it's a conscious process, creative process. And to me, that's what makes a record interesting, and it makes it a good mix. And you've got a lot of tangents so that you can listen to it dozens of times, and every time you hear it, you hear something new. Or, wow, I didn't know that was in there. And it doesn't have any of the sort of technical garbage, the negative technical stuff that's left in the mix. That stuff's all taken out.
What are some of your preferences when it comes to the vocal and instrument placing when mixing a song?
A lot of the work I do is heavy. So, I mean, I like vocal. I've always liked the vocal, very loud and very upfront, so that it cuts through very much like it would at a live concert. So, and usually that sort of mix also translates really well to radio, and it's something that, you know, the listeners often can really, it helps them connect with the lyrics. So it's something like that. And for guitars, I like to mix, like I said, I like to mix guitars loud. I mean, you know, I've heard people say when they listen to my mixes, it's like everything loud all the time, you know, and that's really how I like to do it. I like to have everything, so I like having guitars in your face. I like having everything so that you get this nice wall of well-balanced sound.
Do you have a signature sound in all your recording?
When I listen to it, to me, I just listen to, say, something I've done, and when I feel that it's right and I've handed it off to the client, to me, when I listen to it, it feels that it's right. But, you know, I've been told, you know, when the client's looking for a specific sound, you know, when they're looking for my sound, they call me. I do have one. I can't tell you exactly what it is, but people have told me I have it, so I would have to say yes.
How do you approach each new musical project that you work with?
First thing is with enthusiasm. You know, it's the whole idea that we're trying to create something that's great and trying to take what the artist's vision is and make the vision exactly down the same path that the artist is envisioning, except use my experience to take it a little bit past what they were thinking, so that they're really pleased with it, and after they've heard it, you know, say 1,000 or 2,000 times, that they're still going, wow, that's really great.
Do you think there's too much compression in sound quality in today's digital recordings?
That's a great question. I think that there's too much bad compression in today's current recordings, that there's, you know, to have something that's music has been compressed for a long time. You know, compressors are really old pieces of technology. They've been around forever. The whole idea is, I think it takes knowledge of how to use them, and if you're going to abuse them, you know, to abuse them, say, creatively as part of a texture in a song. But when you have something loud all the time, you know, the equivalent would be if you were driving a car down the road and there was always somebody beside you with a police siren going, then the police siren after a while is going to mean nothing to you. You know what I mean? It's going to mean nothing to you, and it's not going to be a warning anymore. And it's one of those things that if you have something that's smashed and always as loud as it could be, you just get tired.
Yeah.
Listeners, you don't want to listen to it anymore. You just get tired and you turn it off. And, you know, we try and get something that, you know, I can make stuff loud, but I also like to maintain dynamics within a song. And, you know, that's something that was done with the latest Rush studio album, Snakes and Arrows. If you look at it, it's a pretty loud record, but it has a lot of dynamic motion in it, you know, basically trying to sort of fight the tide of ultra-compressed music.
What genre of music does less compression and sound quality creates a dynamically better quality sound mix?
That's a good question. I think if you use less compression, I think that something like that can help all kinds of music. Most notably, you know, if you have, say, there's a few genres I don't touch very much in right now. Let's say jazz is one of the types of music where, you know, you really need the motion and the breathing for it to, for the music to come across properly. You know, and I've heard some jazz records that are really compressed, and I don't know, on first listen, I'm not a jazz aficionado at all, but on first listen, to me, it just felt wrong. I think rock music, you know, I mean, guitars, you know, you have something with metal guitars. Metal guitar, just by nature of how the sound is generated, is very compressed, so it doesn't really have to be compressed. It's such a tough call, you know. It's something that's specific to the artist, you know. If you're compressing something a lot and it ends up sounding homogeneous and like everybody else, to me, that's a mistake. If you're compressing it and it's something that sounds really great, you know, I mean, there's some old Zeppelin stuff where the drums are just compressed so much, and it sounds great, and you can't really evaluate it just on being compressed or not. It's like if the effect of compressing it is a positive one, it's the right thing to do. If it makes it, homogeneous or fatigues the listener, in my opinion, it might be a mistake.
In the recording process, what do you think is the most important part, the recording, mixing, or the mastering?
They're all important, and let me just touch on each of them briefly. First off, mastering, it's really important that the guy is listening and knows when to do nothing, okay? If the mastering guy automatically winds up the compressor and smashes it, that makes it quite often a bad mastering job, in my opinion. Recording is to be able to capture what the artist is envisioning as best he can basically in the field. Make the guitar sound as they're intended, make the singing sound as it's intended, and keep all the technical stuff out of the way, whether it's preamp noise, whether it's noise in the signal, or background noise, air conditioning, like all sorts of really silly things, just make sure that stuff's not there and do a good job technically. Mixing is the part that, for me, would be to basically double check the engineer's work, and if he's done something that's not conducive to the client's vision, make those adjustments to make it the correct vision for the client. Now, as far as one being more important than the other, there are situations where you can have a fantastically engineered record, and from a mixing point of view, it's very simple, and from a mastering point of view, it's very simple. You can have one where it wasn't engineered. The vision may have changed from the beginning of the project, so all of a sudden mixing becomes more critical because you're changing a lot of the stuff that was engineered, and then again, mastering may become really critical if you have something that wasn't recorded or mixed very well, and the mastering guy basically has to sort of pull it out of the fire before it can be used.
So is the mastering process the last creative step or any final sound of the song?
It is. It's the last creative step before it goes off to manufacturing. And, for what I end up doing, I sort of abide by the old school of mastering. You know what? Don't try and change the mix. Don't try and change stuff. Just get it ready for production. And, I have a select number of mastering engineers that sort of agree with my mantra of how to do stuff. And I've been really fortunate that they do what I like to see, and it's actually a very simple, fast process.
What's the biggest mistakes made in recording?
Not listening to the project as a whole, not listening to the sounds of say, basically getting all this stuff out of the way at the very beginning and saying, okay, well, what are we doing? What are we doing here with the if we're going to record this? Where do we really want to go with this? What is the vision? What's the vision to do this? And then put all the tools together and do it. And you know what? A lot of it is having fun doing it. None of us are working at a 7-Eleven, cleaning out the slushy machine at the end of the day. We're making music, which is a fantastic thing. We should all feel really good about it. And when you feel really great about what you're doing, that always translates to the final product. And then the listener enjoys it that way. So it just turns out to be this great win-win situation.
Can you describe your recording environment?
My recording environment is usually really, really disgustingly bad comedy on my part all the time. And that sort of disguises any of the technical stuff. It takes all of the technical aspects away from the artists, and if there is something that they see that's going on, I'm really upfront saying, listen, I'm doing this because of this, this, and this, so that they're not feeling, I like to keep the stress level in a session down to absolute minimum, and we like to have a lot of fun. When I was doing this rush, when I did the Snakes and Arrows record, I think it was a total of about 12 weeks of recording and mixing time, and when we were done, our stomachs were hurting from laughing so much because we had so much fun with the process, and I think that's ultra important so that you can make a good record. And you know what? It's really great because if somebody has a fun time making the record, really often you get the call back to do the next one, which is fantastic.
What are some simple tips on setting up a studio workstation and recording platform?
Workstation as far as just the overall studio environment? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
How I like to set it up is I like to set up a bunch of different areas for each aspect of the record: drums, bass, guitar, keyboards, vocals. I like to have, if we have that, I like to have basically 5 stations set up so that if we're recording and let's say we've done drums and bass and guitars, and all of a sudden the singer says, I want to sing. Well, he just goes over there and sings. There's no setup time. There's no wait time. Everything is done on the spot, and that makes it so that I'm prepared for, we could sit down and end the day and we say, okay, we're going to start with electric guitars tomorrow. We walk in the morning and all of a sudden, you know what? We're going to do some keyboards first. So in that case, in this situation, I basically have all scenarios covered all the time, and I'm prepared to do anything that the artist wants so that the session's always running smooth.
How has producing music changed to way back in the day?
It's necessary for it to be a lot more efficient. Again, because of the internet, because of the way budgets aren't the same as they used to be. Because of downloading, and because there's a lot more bands than there used to be. It's there's a lot of different reasons, but the production has to, in my opinion, the production has to be a lot more defined, a lot more planned ahead. I think the idea of being able to do a Def Leppard and take 3 to 5 years to make a record, I think that's very difficult from a business model point of view. I think that is a very difficult thing to do now.
Have you produced any music on vinyl yet?
Not exclusively on vinyl, but a number of the artists that I work with, they like to release on the really heavy duty, the really thick vinyl. They like to release on that. So the production aspect of it doesn't really change. The mastering done for vinyl is different than a CD, but that's after I'm done. So we'll do a test pressing, we'll do a mastering that's done specifically for vinyl, and they then do a test pressing of the record on vinyl, and then see how it sits. To see if the needle is working too hard in the groove. So it's basically just cut depth and stuff that you play with.
Does it take a lot of money to mix a great sounding song?
It takes a lot more money to not put in the time to mix something and then have it go wrong and then to do it again. So a lot of the times what I'll recommend to clients, and this is both independent and artists that have full-on major label, is that, do it right the first time, and it's a lot less expensive than basically screwing around with a bunch of different things and then coming back at the end anyways, with your wallet a lot lighter because you've spent a lot of money in your budget. Because ultimately, the artists are getting more intelligent, and they know at the end of the day that's their money, and they have to work to repay it. So they're getting a lot more intelligent about their decisions and choices.
Have you ever worked with other engineers like Bob Clearmountain and Bob Ludwig?
I haven't worked with Bob Ludwig directly. He's mastered some projects after I'd completed mixing them. Bob Clearmountain and I actually both do the same job. He's actually mixed a few songs. I recorded a couple songs for the Serendipity soundtrack a number of years ago, Sean Colvin track and Chantal Kreviazic track, and I recorded them and he mixed them. I did have the opportunity of doing some work with Bob Rock, and I've actually been doing quite a bit of work with another engineer, mixer, producer named Nick Raskulinix, and his main claim to fame is the Foo Fighters, and I worked with him on the Rush Snakes and Arrows record.
Awesome. What are your concerns for the future of recording?
What I really like, the only bad thing about the industry I could say right now is that the market is so saturated with artists that, I feel bad that there's a lot of great talent that may be missed. That might be missed because just the sheer number of artists and with the direct marketing available using the internet, that with the direct marketing that there's so many bands that every one of them can't be heard. It's impossible just because of sheer numbers. There's only 24 hours in the day, and so the fact that somebody that's making a really fantastic musical statement might be overlooked. I think that's about the worst part of it. The fact that there's so many tools available now to make great music. To me, it levels the playing field quite a bit, and it just comes down to the painter, and not the paintbrush.
Overall, what's your opinion of the music industry today?
I think that the industry, there's parts of it. Obviously, the business model, the old business model of the big record, the stereotype of the big record company dude with the big stogie and, hey, baby, you're going to go right to the top. I think that sort of thing, that's an old business model, and it's changing, and it's gone, and artists are, because there's the sheer number of artists have to be able to apply themselves more to their own career. They have to learn to market themselves more. They have a lot of tools at their disposal, the main one being the internet, but there's software out there to do great graphics, to do a lot of great things, and for people to communicate more and collaborate more. So there's all of these great advantages to be able to do this in the music industry. And if you have a chance to have, to be able to get make your musical statement and then get it out there to the public and create sort of a symbiotic relationship with the public, where the public is enjoying and respecting your work, and you're in turn enjoying and respecting your listeners. What better thing can there be? And you have all the tools at your disposal now. I get lots of calls from labels to do work. I get lots of independent labels calling me and lots of bands calling me directly to do mixes for them. And I think it's fantastic that the door is open to everybody, because everyone's looking to improve themselves and make the best possible CD that they can make.
Do you feel that engineers, music producers, and mixers are left out of the spotlight when the media promotes a musical artist?
Well, you're talking to me, so I would say no.
Okay.
You know what? I don't think so. I think that it's the producer or engineer creator's responsibility to promote their own career, just like it is with an artist. That you can't just sit back and expect it to happen for you. You have to go out there and grab it yourself. And that's something that some of my peers that are successful as well. They either have a management company that's proactive doing that, or they do it themselves. So no, I don't think so. I think if they're left out, that it's a lot of it's their own doing.
Before we wrap up our interview, can you plug in your web addresses?
I sure can. If anybody wants to find out more about what I do, they could go to my website at www.richardchycki.com. That's spelled CHYCKI. And there's a bunch of music there, a bunch of information about stuff that's going on, photos, and there's a contact page there as well. So, everybody drop by and say, hey.
Any last words?
No, listen, you know what? I really appreciate it. What you're doing here is fantastic, with the whole process of just feeding public, more information that could ultimately be valuable to them. I think it's a great thing that you're doing. So hats off to you.
Great, thank you. A lot of the topics and questions I asked you, we took in our broadcasting classes.
Oh, fantastic. That's great.
You're educating us.
That's all good.
Thank you, Richard, for allowing our e-zine to interview you, and you rock.
Hey, fantastic. Continued success.